Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves here for a brand new match preview on the channel. Wolves are on the travels this weekend, going to Manchester City in the Premier League. A real tough game for Gary O'Neill's side this weekend, but I'll be giving my thoughts, the latest team news. We'll have the opposition perspective later on in the video as well as always. And our channel partners over at Football Prizes have got another cracking Wolves prize up for grabs. This week it is a Wolves squad signed and custom LED frame shirt display. So that draw ends next Wednesday. So I'll make sure I leave a link in the top of the description if you want to get involved in that one. But yeah, Manchester City this weekend. Thankfully, Wolves got back to winning ways against Luton last Saturday at Molineux. And you could see the quality in how much better Wolves looked when they had Matheus Cunha and Hwang Hee-chan both starting in that game. Cunha got about 75 minutes again. I think Hwang was pretty much on for the duration of the match. So thankfully the sharpness and the fitness of those players is getting much better. Question marks over the availability of some players, which I'll touch on in a second. But Gary O'Neill will not be on the touchline for this weekend's game. He had his fine, £8,000 fine, I believe, and a one-game touchline ban after some of the comments that he made to the officials after the West Ham game when we lost, and obviously Max Kilman's late goal was disallowed. So that hearing's happened. He's banned for the City game. But it'll be interesting because you'd assume, obviously he's got his assistants and coaches that can be on the sideline. But also, he'll be at the ground. It's not a stadium ban, it's just a touchline ban, and he'll be watching it from higher up. And it'll be interesting to see, the difference if he's watching the game higher up, if what difference that does make for Wolves. But in terms of the squad availability, Tommy Doyle's the obvious one. He's ineligible for this game due to being on loan from Manchester City, so he can't play. And then the question marks over the other players. So Santi Bueno was the key one really going into this match. Gary O'Neill was confident, or at least hopeful, that Santi Bueno would be back for this game against Manchester City, especially as we've only got the two centre-halves, and you'd assume he'll want to play a back five in this game. So Santi Bueno, you'd hope, will be back fit. Ryan Aït-Nouri did come off with a slight knock, but again, you'd hope he'll be okay and fit for this game as well. And then you've got the likes of Jean-Rick Bellegarde, who has been sort of touch and go, has been close for the last few weeks, but not really made a first-team match-day squad as well. And then the big one, really, that I'm intrigued to see if this game is the right game, or at least if this is the time, Pedro Neto. Now, Gary O'Neill mentioned maybe 4 weeks ago that Pedro Neto, he was confident that he'll play some part in the final games of the season. Look, there's only 3 games left of this campaign now, but Pedro Neto was back training on the grass maybe 10 days ago, a week to 10 days ago. So he could be back in contention, possibly for this squad. If not, maybe the game against Crystal Palace, because I'm sure Pedro will be desperate to try and show what he's capable of over the last game or so to maybe get a chance of being in that squad for Portugal in the Euros. So be interesting. I mean, with the players available, I think obviously no Tommy Doyle. You maybe think Boubacar will keep his place centrally as well in the team. Let's have a quick look at what my predicted lineup is for this match anyway. I think goalkeeper Sarr will keep his place. Semedo at right wing back. I would say I would expect maybe Santi Bueno to be back. So I'd probably go with Semedo, Santi Bueno, Kilman, Totti, and Aït-Nouri left back if he's fit. Lamina, Gomez, and Traoré as a midfield three, and then go with Matheus Cunha and Hwang Hee-chan up front. It's going to be crucial. We need that pace of those Wolves players against Manchester City, especially when we're playing this sort of counter-attacking style, which you would assume we play with. But City haven't been unbelievable over the last few weeks. Look, they're pushing and probably still favourites to go and win the Premier League title, but we could put a real spanner in the works of this title race if we turn up. And our season's pretty much done. We're mathematically safe. We have been for some time. European football, unless we win our last 3, which is unlikely. European football is even if we win those 3, I think it's unlikely. But I'm looking forward to this one. I'm not going to the game this weekend, but obviously I'll be watching it, and I'm just intrigued to see how Wolves line up, how we perform. Are we going to be at the races? And let's see what damage we can cause Manchester City. But I spoke to David, who's a Manchester City fan, to get his thoughts on the game, on Manchester City, and he gave us an in-depth look on how Man City are getting on recently and life under Pep Guardiola. So then, guys, I'm delighted to be alongside David from the Blue Moon podcast, Manchester City fan, to give his perspective ahead of this weekend's game. David, thanks for jumping on Talking Walls. How are you keeping?
Anytime. I am very well. I am very well, thanks.
Good, good. Interesting end to the season, David. Looking at it now, a game in hand on Arsenal, 1 point behind him. It's going to be a really interesting title race coming into the last few weeks or so. Liverpool dropped off a little bit, thankfully for you guys. But I mean, thoughts on the season? I'm assuming you were expecting to be up and around this point at this point of the season, chasing the title. But are you happy with how things have gone so far?
Yeah, it's a really weird season in that I think City have been generally not as good as previous years, and generally not as kind of decisive and as certainly as clinical as previous years. And then here they are with 4 games to go with the title in their own hands. When actually a few weeks ago it looked as if they were going to be the third horse in a 3-horse race.
Yeah.
So I'm delighted with kind of how it's finished. They're in a position now where, listen, I'm not expecting pretty games. We start with Wolves this weekend, Fulham away the following weekend, Spurs away on the Tuesday night, and then West Ham at home. I am not expecting any of those 4 games to be pretty. I think it's going to be a slog now to get the points. And it's the stage of the season where City are generally quite good at doing that. So you can't turn your nose up at that position. I do think that overall, over the course of the season, City have had a few issues to iron out. And weirdly, with 4 games left, I'm still not 100% sure they have ironed them out. So it's like it's a bit of an odd one, really. So like it sounds really entitled to sit here and to say that they could be better. But the truth is, they could be better. They've had a lot of games this season where they've where they should have won and they haven't won, or where they've got away with it when they perhaps shouldn't have won. So it's an interesting one, and I think you can't be displeased with the way the season's gone. Being a point off the top of the table with a game in hand as the run in is really taking hold. But it's been a battle to get there, when in previous years it might not have been.
Yeah, I suppose when regardless whether you're at the top end of the table or the bottom, when you set yourself a standard, which City and Guardiola have done over the last few years, I sort of agree. Although you're at that top end of the season, top end of the league table, sorry, as an outsider, even the last few weeks, although you're winning games, it hasn't necessarily been as comfortable as you would have wanted it to be. And
Oh, they were not good against Forest.
no,
They
yeah, I watched
spent
that game as well. I
yeah
think
they spent an hour not being very good.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought the first 60 minutes, especially I sort of caught it from half time onwards, the first 10, 15 minutes of the second half, he struggled to get a foothold on the game, really. But that's why it'd be interesting to me, because Wolves, no doubt, will play quite a counter-attacking style. I think City will have a lot of the ball. And our season's pretty much done. Like we did a preview over on your podcast. Our season's pretty much done. So I'm very interested to see how Wolves approach this game. One player, David, which is an interesting one, is obviously Erling Haaland. Last year, absolutely smashed it. It was phenomenal for City. This year's been a bit stop-start, mainly due to injuries. Do we think he's going to start this game? Do you think he's going to be back to his best for the remaining games of this season?
It's funny because I think the 20 minutes he got against Forest at the weekend, I think, were his best 20 minutes he's had in a long, long time. And there's a really weird kind of. I mean, look at his numbers. His numbers have been fantastic again this year. I think he's still the league's leading scorer at this point, and he had 2 months off injured in over Christmas. So, like, you can't argue with that. But at the same time, you look at how City have been playing this season. You look at some of the issues that they've had. Haaland has been not an issue, but he's been a question that they haven't answered yet. And what I mean by that is there's times when he's at the top of the pitch and he's playing the centre forward role, and they just can't get him in the game, and that's not his fault. He's been very well marshalled by a number of centre backs at various times. But then the responsibility on the other players to kind of do more to get the ball to him and to get him involved, they haven't quite found the solution to that. And then when he hasn't been there, certainly over Christmas, they looked a lot more fluid without him there, with Julian Alvarez up top. But then Alvarez has lost form in the last kind of 2 months or so. And when Haaland hasn't been there and Alvarez has been there instead, they haven't exactly set the world on fire with how they've been attacking, and they've looked like they've really missed Haaland. So you have an interesting sort of balance to strike, and I think the Forest game actually really showed the difference between what City are with and without Haaland, because for the first kind of 60, 65 minutes, Forest played a back three with 2 wing backs. They had one man on Julian Alvarez, and the other 2 centre backs were in turn taking it in turns to mark Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. And City just couldn't get the ball to those two between the lines.
Yeah,
As soon as Haaland comes on, they have two centre backs on Haaland, and De Bruyne's got acres of space, and that's where that second goal comes from. And suddenly, City, instead of having a lot of possession, which they did at Forest, but in their own half and trying to kind of get into the midfield, they suddenly had a lot of possession in the Forest half and were keeping it tidy there. And so I think what that says to me is that when it comes to Wolves and to Fulham and to Spurs and to West Ham, Haaland has to start. He just has, like, whether or not he's fully fit, he just has to be in that team
for sure.
because he, like, even if he's not going to get into a shooting position and they're not going to be able to get the ball to him, they need him there to give the space for the other players by just being such a nuisance to the other defenders. Now, you spend the money that you spend on Erling Haaland, and you have a striker with the robotic quality that he's got to stick it in every goal a game or whatever it is his record is. You can't say he needs to be on the pitch just to occupy defenders. He's got to have a bit more to it than that. But I think for the team, they need him there in the first instance to offer that
Yeah,
disruptive ability and that and kind of keep the centre backs busy. And then at the same time, he helps them get up the pitch. The number of times where you can just put the ball up to Haaland and have him hold it and hold it and hold it, and then bring everybody in higher up the pitch. Like, with the greatest of respect, Alvarez is a great player, but you can't chip the ball up to him and to get him to hold it and keep it, because he's
yeah,
just not that type of player. He's a little bit more the kind of the threat in behind, although they don't really use him that way. Haaland is the sort of player where defenders do not want to give that De Bruyne the chance to put the ball in behind, because if he does and Haaland gets onto it, he's got a one-on-one. And while he hasn't been as clinical this year in the one-on-ones, he is still pretty good at them.
yeah.
So you've got to. He has to start. If he's even if he's kind of 80%, 90%, he's just got to be in the team for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the fact that he's still top goal scorer, I think, again, like I said earlier, he set himself a standard like last year, which it would have been incredible if he could consistently hit those numbers. An unbelievable debut season for City. And it'll be interesting. I think Craig Dawson, he's out injured, unfortunately, for this game, but he did an unbelievable job at Molineux on Erling Haaland last time out. But it'll be interesting because I think you've got, like you said, very easy to double up on players, but I would assume they'll try their best to get Foden involved. They'll try their best to have Kevin De Bruyne still involved. If you've got all three of those, there's a lot of players to sort of occupy there. So I think that midfield
I
battle will be
yeah
interesting.
I'm interested to see who he picks, actually, because Foden missed out a weekend with
Yeah,
illness, so he's had a week off. He will hopefully be, feeling better and be available. But I don't know I don't know who drops out. I assume it would be Alvarez that drops
yeah,
out in order to keep Bernardo and De Bruyne in there with Foden coming in as well. And so it'd be interesting to see what he does there, because Alvarez on the left, while it worked at the end of the game against Forest, we all have cold sweats about what happened at Anfield when he played there, and he just wasn't very good at all. So Alvarez is a much better player when he's in behind the striker or when he is the striker. I don't think they should be shoehorning him around. So if Foden's fit, if Bernardo's fit, Bernardo's looked a bit tired, but I don't see any reason with a week off to take him out of the team. And De Bruyne has been. He's been very well managed since he's come back from his injury, because he's had times when he's been taken out of the team because he's not injured, but at the risk of
yeah.
aggravating it again. So that he if he doesn't start, that's the reason why. It's just it's a precaution other than anything else.
And obviously Pep Guardiola has done an amazing job at Man City. Everybody knows how good he is. Is there any sort of doubts for his long-term future at City? I know coming up to every summer or midpoint of the season, there's always talks of him, maybe this could be his last one, or Barcelona or Spain or whatever. What's your thoughts? Any sort of insight in what you think his long-term future could be at City?
I don't know. I certainly think we are. Well, I mean, we're 7 years in now, 8 years in. We're certainly in the latter days of the Guardiola era. He's not like we're not still in the first half of his reign. He's not going to do 20 odd years at City.
Yeah.
So we're certainly kind of winding down towards the end of his era. I've got a sneaking suspicion he'll sign an extension though. His contract is due to end at the end of next season. So like this summer will be, in theory, his last summer at City if he doesn't sign an extension. I part of me thinks that he will, out of sheer stubbornness, because there's the thing with Guardiola is that he finishes the contract wherever he's been. So he's only had two managerial jobs before that. So I know it's quite easy to say
Yeah, yeah,
that the pattern is that. But he signed for 3 years at Bayern, and he did it. He signed. I think he was on a rolling contract at Barcelona, and then at the end had said, "I'm not signing an extension," and left. I don't see a situation where City do a sort of a 1 year rolling thing with him. I think they're more likely. I think it'd be more likely to offer him another 2 years, and then another 2 years, and another 2 years. But he every now and then he drops things into press conferences, and he drops things into interviews that makes you think he just gets it here, and he kind of he understands what it is to be
yeah,
City these days. And there was a lot, certainly in his early days, that he didn't really understand about City fans and the fan base, and it didn't really kind of make sense. And then I mean, I hate to say it, but the Champions League ban happened, and the Court of Arbitration for Sport decision came in, and he went full Bert, and just like was absolutely in it, and he delivered the press conference that City fans needed to hear, and he was fantastic, and it just kind of it screamed, "Oh, I get it, I understand what it is to be a City fan these days."
yeah,
And then the Premier League charges happened, and like the same sort of thing is happening now, where he's constantly fighting for kind of the club and the fans, and like constantly talking up what they've achieved, because I do think it does get missed. And like, listen, there's a lot of talk around City and the charges, and the fact that that we're still waiting on kind of what's going to happen with that, and so on and so forth. But there is, and it's a difficult discussion to have, there is still a discussion to be had about, like, even if they are guilty, there is some sort of sporting merit to be had with what they've done, because it's not the money they've spent that has simply meant that they can
yeah,
achieve what they've achieved over the last few years. There is an element of the sporting achievement as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, why didn't Wolves do it, and why didn't Nottingham Forest do it? Because, like, yeah, City spent a lot of money, and there is that, like, you have to have access to that money to get the players. But at the same time, you've got to motivate the players, and you've got to get them playing, and you've got to
for
get
sure.
the system. I mean, like, John Stones didn't play as a centre back roving into midfield and a false nine in the Champions League final because City were charged, that sort of thing. And that, like, if they're found guilty, that's a very difficult discussion to have, because
Yeah,
I mean, who's listening to who's listening to that discussion? And
yeah,
if they're found not guilty, I mean, at the same time, a lot of people still who's listening to that discussion. Maybe I'll just shout into the void, and every now and then somebody might say, actually, he raises a good point there, but I don't know. And so, kind of, what all of that does, when you tie all of that together, the brains behind it all is Guardiola,
yeah,
and like there's been Manuel Pellegrini and Roberto Mancini had access to the same sort of funding that Guardiola's had, and Guardiola has had access to players that could have gone elsewhere. I mean, a lot of City's targets went elsewhere in previous summers. Guardiola was furious in 2019, I think it was, that they didn't sign Harry Maguire from Leicester, that they didn't get a centre back. And Harry Maguire's a punchline these days with his United career. I've no doubt that if he'd joined City, he'd have been a great player, and he'd have worked wonderfully in City's system, because that's what Guardiola does to players. Manuel Akanji was picked up for 15 million or so from Borussia Dortmund. Now, like, that's an absolute steal, and he would have been available to any of the other top clubs out there to go and get, because Dortmund were trying to get rid. The signing of Erling Haaland, actually, weirdly, is one of the few where City have made where it's like they have to get this guy, and that's the guy that they're going for. Everybody, most other players that they've signed have been available to Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, whoever, and they've chosen not to sign them.
yeah,
And City have walked away from some deals as well, because they've decided it's not value for money. They walked away from Virgil van Dijk, for instance, and how the course of history could have been changed if they'd signed Van Dijk instead of Laporte that summer, that winter. So, like, there's a lot of kind of building blocks that go into it. I understand that the money has an effect, and I understand all of that, but at the same time, Guardiola has coached these players into what they've become, and I'm terrified of the day that Guardiola says this is it and that's over, because there will inevitably be an incredibly big drop off,
yeah,
and an incredibly big drop off might be you finish second, and it's like it's a really tight title race that goes to the wire, and you don't win it. Fine, I'm all right with that. But ultimately, like, he has provided a level of football, and he he makes me think about football in a way that I've never thought about football before. And I play 7-a-side or 6-a-side on a Tuesday evening, and I sit there and think, right, well, if I'm a goalkeeper, if I hold the ball and hold the ball and hold the ball and then pass it, I'm giving the player that I'm passing to more time and more
Yeah,
space. And
yeah,
it's like just little things like that that I didn't think about previously. A ball comes to my feet and I just whack it clear because I'm a goalkeeper. I don't use my feet on anything like this. And so, like, the fact that that he's built this system that makes me go, what's he doing here? Why is that happening? Because that must be happening for a reason. And then when you kind of dig into the what and the why, you end up with John Stones roving it around the edge of the box in the Champions League final, and you feel perfectly comfortable with it because you know they know what they're doing. And we'll never see the like of that again at City, whoever follows him. So
yeah.
I'll be sad to see him go. I think he's probably got one more contract extension in him, and then I think that's probably it. So I feel like 3 years would be the maximum that we'd see after this season.
Yeah, I think I mean loads of points in there. The ball playing goalkeeper thing is just it's come common practice almost now in football as well. I know even Wolves are trying. Well, a lot of clubs in the Premier League
It
are trying to
works.
take
It
play
works,
out from
doesn't it? Yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah. So, but it's hard to find a lot of goalkeepers. I think now young lads being coached to pass the ball, whereas a lot of old school goalkeepers were just like you said, taught to
Mm.
catch it, dive, parry it, kick it clear. You know, they don't know how to play the ball with their feet as much. So, it'll be interesting to see how things change on that. But I think almost with Pep as well, and I'm sure he'll be aware of this because long term he'll want to help City. I don't actually think there's that many managers out there right now. And I don't think you're going to get someone exactly like for Pep that's just going to take over. De Zerbi was spoke about, I'm sure, over the last 12 months or so. But there's maybe slight question marks over him now. But I think Pep would want to leave the club in very good hands. And at the moment, I don't think there's many managers available that would be able to continue with that. So
I wonder if we can just keep telling him that, and
yeah,
like year on year, just,
yeah.
there's no,
There's no one
we had
there
a look,
yet, Pep. Yeah.
there's nobody.
Yeah, so no, it'd be interesting. I think look, it's been amazing for City, amazing for the Premier League in general as well. David, looking at this match though, I mean, I'm assuming you are expecting a City win. How is City going to line up in terms of shape? It's pretty similar to what we've seen so far this season, I'd assume.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything too radical. I think he says, having just called Guardiola one of the most radical people on the planet. I think what you'll see is the same sort of shape. It's kind of a 4-3-3 that City play, but it depends who's got the ball and when they
Yeah, yeah,
like I talk all the time. This is the thing that he's done to me. So like through doing the podcasts, I've fairly on good terms with Nader Manua, the former City
yeah,
defender. And so every now and then, like he says things to me that like make me think I don't know what the answer is to that. And he said to me, like when you talk about a formation, when are the players in that formation? What do you see? Is it at kickoff? And I'm like, well, no, because at kickoff they've got obviously the players around the centre circle,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like they're not taking. And so when is it? Is it when they're taking a goal kick? It's like, well, no, because they move them here. So he's like, formation doesn't matter, does it? Like it
yeah, yeah,
just doesn't. Like it depends on who's doing what role. And so that's kind of where I'm at with City. It's loosely a 4-3-3, and that's how Sky will write it out. But when the ball gets going, you know the players move and they interchange with each other. I don't know who he'll play where. That's the other side of things. If it's it was Grealish and Doku at the weekend as the wide players, and that didn't really work in terms of getting City control of the game and stopping Forest from breaking out. Now it's a bit of a different story at the Etihad because obviously City at home is a different story
yeah,
than going away from home. But at the same time, I think they'll want Grealish in there for his ability to control games. I think they'll want Bernardo in there for the same sort of thing. And if Foden is available and isn't ill, maybe it's Doku that he comes in for because Doku's a little bit more of a live wire and a little bit more of a spark that I think you can't, like, if you have too many of them in the pitch, then you don't really control it in the same way. So if you have him and Foden in the team, maybe it's not quite as City don't quite have the same iron grip as they would do otherwise. And I don't know whether we'll see the good old centre back stepping into midfield role because obviously when you beat us earlier in the season, Rodri wasn't there, and Guardiola was doing his damnedest to work out how to control the middle of the pitch
yeah.
without Rodri. Um, once he's got Rodri, he just puts Rodri there, and he doesn't need to work out what the rest is. He can kind of just build the attack around that. So that, I guess, is the big plus, and then the rest of it kind of fills in itself. There's question marks over which defenders play because Diaz missed the weekend with illness as well, but Ake and Akanji have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Stones. He's been on the bench the last few weeks, and I think it's fitness. I don't think it's anything else. I think he's another one that really struggles for fitness. So if there's any slight doubt about him, then he just doesn't play. So I think he's been on the bench with fitness, and if if he's ready, maybe he comes back in. But if not, I've got no worries with Ake and Akanji carrying on. And then Walker and Guardiola. Guardiola's been fantastic this last few weeks actually as well. He's really kind of got to grips with the position. So I mean that doesn't really help you. Pick a load of attacking names from the hat. Yeah. They could go anywhere. I wouldn't bank on anyone for your fantasy league team. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think I've got Haaland and Foden. I think. Oh,
yeah,
and Ederson was on my bench, but he's injured? Is he? Ederson?
Well, he went off at weekend, and Guardiola he was seen leaving the City ground in a sling, and Guardiola said afterwards, "Oh, doesn't look good." And then they one of my friends yesterday, who's a journalist, a Brazilian journalist, said, "Oh, the injury's not. He's had a scan, and it's nowhere near as bad as they thought. He's in contention for the weekend." So, like, weirdly, the goalkeeper is not a position that I think City fans are worried about at the moment because Ederson is fantastic with his feet and doesn't really make too many saves. And then you've got, apart from the Champions League final when he was keeping everything out with everything. And then you've got Stefan Ortega, who is not quite as good with his feet as Ederson is, but probably a bit better with his saving and his and kind of command of his area. And he's certainly not as aggressive as Ederson is coming off his line. So Ederson is, he got sent off at Molineux a few years ago for being really aggressive off his line. I don't think you get Ortega in that position. I think Ortega's a little bit deeper. Maybe that's what City don't need. Actually, maybe they need Ederson to be that really aggressive player to get the best out of the team. But ultimately, whether Ortega starts or whether Ederson starts, I don't think there's many City fans who would go, "Oh, I'm really worried about that," because Ortega has been fantastic. He's been the best number 2 goalkeeper I have seen at City in a long old time. And there's absolutely no chance he stays as a number 2. He'll go and be a number 1 somewhere because he's that good.
Yeah, I saw someone. We're linked to obviously maybe looking at a new goalkeeper. I saw a few Wolves fans this week talking about maybe getting Ortega in as a number 1. So
if you can get him, he's fantastic. If you can get him, he's brilliant.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting. And David, to finish off, score prediction for this game. What are you thinking?
I hate these, and this is why I have guests on Blue Moon, because then I can ask you to do it and not make me do it. So, because you can only ever look bad, can't you? You can only ever be wrong. And if you get it right, people say you fluked it. If you get it wrong, people go, "Oh, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about, does he?" It's battle mode time for City. They have to win. I don't see Bournemouth this weekend doing City any favours with Arsenal. And they can't get to this stage now with 4 games left and lose a grip on the title. Yeah. It's one of those where they just have to win, and if they don't win, then it's their own fault really. So I'm going to say it's not pretty, but I'm going to say 1-0 City.
Yeah, you look at your form, you've only lost 3 out of 34 games, so I think a City wins a pretty fair and realistic prediction. David, thanks for jumping on the channel anyway. All the best in the title race, and I'm sure I'll catch you again next season, mate.
Thank you very much. We'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, mate. So big thanks to David. I'll make sure to leave a link to him and his podcast in the description down below. Much appreciated. Yeah, I think City are going to win this one personally. I think it could be maybe a 2-0. Not overly confident, but you know what? With Wolves, they never cease to amaze me. So they may well surprise me. We may well get something out of the game. But to get the double over City would be amazing. We set up absolutely brilliantly against them last time at Molineux. If we can do the same today, this weekend, and upset them, then obviously that would be absolutely amazing. So let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below, guys. If there is any major team news, obviously Gary O'Neill will give us that in his pre-match press conference on Friday. Be sure to follow us on all the socials at Talking Wolves to keep you up to date with that. And if there is anything majorly of note, I'll obviously do a video tomorrow evening as well detailing that. But as always, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Fingers crossed it is a positive result for the Wolves, and I'll catch you next time. All the best.